I am happy to. That is why I was calling the students rather than like making a kind of presentation, which is a kind of promotion. This is really scientific, so there is no prejudice attached to a particular company or brand. So and they have incorporated most of the latest developments. I'm not presenting the entire thing because it's around 90 plus slides. So we will touch what is clinically important for you and for the students. So the topic is personalized treatment in the metastatic triple negative breast cancer in 2020. We all know that 15% of the all breast cancers are triple negative. That means they do not express ER, PR, or HER2/neu, and they are chemo responsive. They are chemo responsive, and they do not respond to endocrine manipulations. And even though they show very good response to chemotherapy initially, they have got very poor survival compared to other subtypes, and they have got a high 5-year recurrence rate around 30 to 50%, and recurrence rate is very high in the initial 2 to 3 years of life, and that reflects a hostile biology of these tumors. And among the triple negative, it's a vast spectrum, and at one end we have got a very worse outcome, and on the other end they have got a relatively slow progressing tumors with a relatively better outcome. Which are the characteristics of worse outcome? They are young patients, they present at an advanced stage, they grow very fast, and they metastasize to brain and liver, and they are relatively chemo resistant, and they have got a high BMI, and they are compared to Caucasians, Africans fare badly. And this is a kind of comparison with the luminals. If you are comparing triple negative and HER2/neu with the luminals, you can see that distant metastasis is high. Visceral secondaries like lung and brain are very high compared to the bone. Here you can see the odds ratio more than 1, there is an association. So here the lung and brain recurrence is odds ratio is 2.27, and in the liver also 1.06, and molecularly this is a very important part for the students, very boring part for if you are studying for the exams, but this is mandatory. So Perot et al. Using the gene expression profiling classified breast cancer into 4 major subtypes. We all know that luminal A, luminal based on the KI, and the luminal B, HER2 positive and basal like. Here TNBC and the basal tumors have got biological similarities.
Sir, just a moment, sir. Your slides are not visible. If you can share your slides, it will be good for others to view.
Slides are not visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So you need to share the slides on that background. You can open your slides and then you can. Yes. Now it's visible, sir. And so Sachin sir has also joined.
Okay. I shared it previously. Okay. Now you can see the slides, no?
Yes. Now I can see the slides, sir.
The molecular landscape of TNBC that is defined by a seminal study by Vanderbilt group, and they have divided it into. We all know that in 6 groups, and they are 2 BL1 and BL2 basal like, an immunomodulatory type, mesenchymal type, mesenchymal stem cell subtype, and luminal LAR type, luminal antigen receptor subtype. So what happened afterwards is that this is a repetition of the previous slides. For the students, you can say see the importance of each category. BL is marked cellular proliferation, and they're responding to cellular damaging agents. And BL2 is growth factor signaling with myoepithelial markers. And IM and mesenchymal is important because we'll come to know later. They have got they express as MET and differentiation, and mesenchymal like stem cell like, that is now obsolete. We'll come to that later. LAR is still there, and unstable cellular proliferation response to cellular damage. So this is sorry. TNBC cell lines of the above subtypes to show analysis of the different distinct gene expression profiles and therapy selection. So what happened is that the chemotherapy response is depending upon these. 1 minute. You can see the slides. Can you see the slides?
No, sir. No, sir.
Sorry.
Sir, please check if your slides are open in the background.
Yeah, that is what I'm seeing from the current slides. Yes. Now can you see?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So the response to neoadjuvant chemotherapy is different among the cell types. So we can see that BL1 has got the maximum response to chemotherapy, that is around 52% response to chemotherapy, and BL basal like 2 and luminal LAR type have got the lowest sensitivity to chemotherapy, response rate to chemotherapy. So depending on these molecular subtypes, you can see triple negative is not a single family, it is divided into many subtypes. And later on what happened is that IM and MSL subtypes were essentially related to sample impurities and due to the presence of tumor infiltrating lymphocytes and tumor associated stroma cells. So they have omitted two subtypes, IM and MSL. So now BL1, BL2, mesenchymal and LAR, these are the subtypes. Among these, BL1 have got the highest response to chemotherapy, and BL2 and LAR have got the lower response. So this is a repetition of the previous slides. So Bayer group performed RNA and DNA profiling analysis on 198 TNBC tumors identified 4 stable TNBC subtypes. One is BL lymphocyte depleted, BL lymphocyte predominant, mesenchymal, LAR. And they have different molecular profiles and displayed distinct prognosis. So here we will summarize what we have learned. That is, BL constitutes around 70 to 75, non-BL constitutes around 25 to 30. Among that, AR is 15 and mesenchymal is 25. And both mesenchymal and LAR are less proliferative, and BL is highly proliferating type. And BL is subdivided into BL subtype 1 and 2. And BL1 is highest response to chemotherapy, and they are responsive to DNA damaging agents, including HRR division acting agents like olaparib, talazoparib, veliparib, etc. And BL subtype 2, they got very poor response to chemotherapy. They enrich for genes related to growth factor signaling, EGFR and MET, enrich for PIK3CA, PTEN, AKT dysregulations. That is BL2. Again, mesenchymal, they enrich for PIK3CA, PTEN, AKT dysregulations, enrich for stem cell features, and epithelial to mesenchymal transition markers. So, what are the genetic events? TP53 mutation is reported in 80% of all these TNBC tumors. Unfortunately, it is not targetable right now. MYC amplification, again positive in 40% of the tumors. Again, it is not targetable right now. And some less frequent molecular events potentially targetable. They are AR signaling. AR signaling is another subtopic. We will not discuss AR androgen receptor modulation right now, because it altogether it's a very big subject. DNA damage response agents, PIK3CA, AKT mutations, EGFR and FGFR2 amplification. Right now, agents are developed according to these targets. And immune checkpoint inhibitors recently approved. We all know that atezolizumab is a first line agent in triple negative, and Pembro we can use as a off label in second line. So what are the metastatic TNBC treatment options? We will one is bevacizumab. We all know that it's not a new agent. We all know that 3 pivotal trials, E2100, Avado and Ribbon, and combined analysis of these 3 trials showed a significant improvement. The PFS 5.42, 8.1 months. The response rate also increased 23 to 20 from 23% to 42%, but the OS is not statistically significant. So currently you can use that, but it is not a standard recommendation, particularly endorsed by most of the international guidelines because of the limited treatment options of metastatic TNBC patients. What about the platinums? This TNT clinical trial is important because it showed that carboplatin is probably at least equivalent, probably more potent than taxanes in TNBC. That is a landmark piece of knowledge. They exert a greater therapeutic effect among the TNBC patients. This trial, EGFR and EGFR negative or not EGFR, ER or PR negative or unknown, HER2 negative, and non-BRCA1 and 2, metastatic or recurrent, locally advanced breast cancers, and both BRCA 1 and 2 mutation positive and negative patients were included. The adjuvant taxanes, there should be a gap of at least adjuvant taxanes at least 12 months. If you have used it less than 12 months, they have excluded those patients. Previous platinum exposure they have excluded, and non-anthracyclines also they have excluded. And what they have done is that in one arm they have used carboplatin for 6 cycles, and on progression they were allowed to cross over to docetaxel 100 milligram per meter square into 6 cycles. In the other arm, the sequence is vice versa. So what they have seen is that if BRCA positive germline mutation is there, then carboplatin, the overall response is 68%, and for the BRCA positive patients, docetaxel response rate is 33%. And if they are not BRCA mutated patients, then the carboplatin response rate is a mere 28.1%, and the docetaxel is much more responding. That is around 36.6%. So if you are plotting the PFS in BRCA mutated patient, carboplatin curve is the topmost. It's the best faring. And in the BRCA1 mutated patients, docetaxel, that means taxanes are less impressive than platinum. And in the BRCA negative subset, the platinums fared very badly. So the median PFS of BRCA 1 or 2 mutated patient with a platinum carboplatin is 6.8 months, and if they are not mutated, it is 3.1 month, the lowest curve. So that is the importance of platinum in BRCA 1 and 2 mutated patients. So if you are thinking along the same lines, intrinsic genomic instability of TNBC patients, basal-like TNBC patients, strongly linked to DNA repair defects. Basal-like intrinsic subtype is enriched for tumors with BRCA mutations, and most of the BRCA mutated breast cancer patients have got a triple negative phenotype, that is 75% are triple negative, and rest of them are EGF either ER positive, and HER2 positive BRCA mutations are virtually non-existent. So BRCA 1 and 2 are among the DNA repair genes which are involved in the double-stranded DNA breaks. We all know that. 2 BRCA genes are key components of the DNA homologous recombination repair pathway, which is an error-free process essential for maintaining genomic stability. We all know the theory part, how the PARP inhibitors are going to act. This is that slide I was talking about. Endogenous single-stranded repair occurs in proliferating cells. Single-strand breaks are repaired mostly by PARP-dependent base excision repair pathway. Efficient single-strand breaks is essential for survival of the cells. PARP inhibitors inhibit PARP and thus repair SSB by base excision repair pathway. An unrepaired SSB can be converted into double-strand breaks that are toxic to the cells. And similarly, homologous recombination is the major pathway to repair such lesion during cell replication. HR proficient cells can repair double-stranded breaks originated from the SSB to ensure genomic stability, while HR deficient cells cannot repair the SSB and undergo apoptosis and eventual cell death. So this mechanism is important, is asked in the exams. So we all know the major trials of olaparib, talazoparib and veliparib. We will discuss the first two trials, Olympiad and Embraca. Here, TNBC population were constituting roughly half of the patients, and the primary endpoint was PFS in both the trials. And PFS in the ITT, intent to treat population, is almost similar, 7 months in the Olympiad trial and 8.6 in the Embraca trial. And in the TNBC subset, the HR is very much impressive. That is it is the lowest. That means the efficacy is more. HR is 0.43 and 0.596 respectively in the Olympiad and Embraca trials. And if you are not using any platinum before, PFS is 0.6 in the Olympiad trial, and Embraca it is 0.52. OS it is not statistically significant, still numerically higher in the Olympiad and Embraca arm. Response rate is almost double with these agents, 59.9 versus 28.8 in the treatment of physician choice, and in the Embraca trial 62.6 versus 27.2. In the response rate, overall response rate, that means it's also doubled. So we will it's a continuation of the previous slide. If you have used no platinum before, then the response rate is 65.8 in the Olympiad arm. In the Embraca study, it is 65.2%. So really impressive. That is 2 out of 3 patients are showing a response rate. And duration of response 6.2 months and 5.4 months respectively. And the major side effects, we all know that in ovary and breast, the nausea, anemia and fatigue. These are the major side effects, but discontinuation due to adverse effects are around 5% only. So Olympiad, because of it's a very long presentation, so I'll just run through the major important things. We have described this olaparib study, that is Olympiad, for HER2 negative metastatic breast cancer with a germline BRCA mutation. Remember, we are not testing in this study. We have not tested in the tumor. It is a germline testing. Prior anthracyclines and taxanes were allowed, and 2 or less than 2 chemotherapy lines in the metastatic settings were also allowed, and hormone receptor positive patients were allowed 1 line of endocrine treatment. And if no platinum use, no evidence of progression. Basically, platinum naive patients or platinum sensitive patients were included, or olaparib 300 BD was used. Primary endpoint was PFS. So if you are seeing the all the parameters, it is remarkable study. You can see the PFS suppression by BICR. There is a good suppression among the curves, and the PFS is 7 months versus 4.2 months. So what the caveat of the study is that we all know that they have compared it with a physician choice that includes mainly capecitabine, eribulin, and vinorelbine. Ideally, DNA breaking agents like carboplatin will be a better comparison. And OS between the groups, median PFS, median of 9.3 versus 9.6 months. And it is not statistically significant. So PFS is highly responding and highly significant. Embraca study is also similar with the talazoparib. Again with the germline BRCA1 and 2 mutation, progression-free survival hazard ratio is 0.54. And we can see that the we can see that median PFS is 8.6 months versus 5.6 months. So, summarizing, PARP inhibitors in breast cancer. We can see that Abrazo study could further confirm the prior platinum sensitivity as a strong predictor to ensure ensuing efficacy with the PARP inhibitors. Overall response to talazoparib was 48% in the sensitive patients. That means progression after 6 months of last platinum dose, and 10% of the platinum resistant cases in the platinum resistant cases. So what they are saying in this slide, in the ovarian cancer likewise also, if you are you have got a prior platinum sensitivity or platinum naive patient, they respond very well. But if there is a platinum resistant cases, then they have got a cross resistant with the PARP inhibitor. So they are not responding that well. In the ovarian cancer also, sensitivity to PARP inhibitors is dependent on sensitivity to prior platinum therapy. And response rate of only 15% in the platinum refractory cases, and overall response rate of 60% in the platinum sensitive patients. So no disease progression for greater than 6 months after the platinum treatment is an apparent clinical biomarker. So if you are you can say that if the platinum free interval is more than 6 months, they have got a chance of getting a good response with the PARP inhibitors. And Olympiad and Embraca studies have included minority of the patients with the platinum pre-treated patients, 21% and 16% of the patients respectively. And both studied demanded a clinical evidence of platinum sensitivity for patients inclusion. And PARP inhibitors in platinum pre-treated patients were less pronounced in efficacy of PARP inhibitors in platinum pre-treated patients were less pronounced in both the studies. So, first line PARP suppose you are getting a metastatic TNBC in your clinics with BRCA mutation. How to approach that patient? We all know that taxanes are less impressive in TNBC patients, especially BRCA mutated in the BRCA mutated TNBC patients. So first line PARP inhibitors and platinum are effective and rational treatment options. So which one to use first? There is no head-to-head comparison with the platinum or PARP inhibitors. Safety profile and quality of life favor PARP inhibitors as initial treatment. But if somehow if the patient is not affordable or PARP inhibitors are not accessible, then carboplatin is a reasonable choice. It can be clubbed with the taxane. Carboplatin and paclitaxel has shown remarkable efficacy in germline BRCA mutated MBC. Median PFS of 12 months and median OS of greater than 2 years is seen. So this is the new paradigm of the BRCA mutated metastatic TNBC. So screening guidelines of the TNBC patients, we all know that ASCO demands in triple negative patients or luminal metastatic breast cancer patients, genetic counseling and possibly BRCA testing should be discussed with the patient. That if the results can affect the treatment decision, risk evaluation and genetic counseling. Genetic counseling should be offered if hereditary risk factors are suspected. For example, women with a strong family history of breast, endometrial or colon cancer, or those or for those 60 years of age or younger with triple negative breast cancer. Triple negative breast cancer less than 60 years, you can see for BRCA mutation. And CCN also, triple negative breast cancer diagnosed less than 60 years, consider referring to cancer genetic professional. What about the immunotherapy? We all know that breast cancers are not highly immunogenic tumors, unlike lung cancer or head and neck tumors. It has got a relatively low TMB, tumor mutation burden. TNBC have got a, but in TNBC many cases confirm that they have got a higher tumor mutation burden and higher tumor infiltrating lymphocytes also. And moreover, RNA sequence data from TCGA showed that higher expression of the PDL1 mRNA in TNBC compared to non-TNBC. So they have got a higher expression of the PDL1 compared to non-triple negative breast cancers, and they have got a greater cytotoxic T cell infiltrate also. The mechanism of action, for the amount of time I am skipping that slide. We all know that how immunotherapy is going to act. Peculiar immunogenic genomic feature of the TNBC gave strong rationale to investigate role of immune checkpoint inhibitors in these patients. Efficacy of Pembro and atezolizumab as single agents was shown in the early clinical studies. But what we are seeing is that if you are using immunotherapy, you have to use it upfront. It should be the first line. What is the rationale? In the clinical study, it has shown that down the line, it has got a very poor overall response rate. The response rate of Pembro is 4.7% down the line and 6% in the case of atezolizumab. But those who are responding, they have responded very well. They have got a 1 year survival of 100%. And those who are not responders still have a stable disease, have got a 1 year survival of 65%. So in contrast to second line data, frontline single agent Pembro was quite acceptable because their response rate is more than 3 times. Overall response rate is 21.4 and 24% respectively in the case of Pembro and atezolizumab. So this is that slide which is showing that first line, second line difference. So if you are using it in the first line, the response rate is almost 4 times. Pembro data, it is still not FDA approved in the first line. Neither it is approved in our country as first line. So I am skipping this slide for time's sake. Just I'll see the conclusion part. Results of the keynote 119, though not practice changing, could provide an important note considering the benefit of Pembro in those tumors who are PDL1 strongly positive. Which are those tumors? That they have got a CPS score of at least 20 by 22C3 assay. So every immunotherapy has got a characteristic test accompanying that. You have to do that CPS score or TPS score, whatever, you have to do by their assigned assay only. So in this case, Pembro CPS score equal to or more than 20 by 22C3 assay. And in the impassioned study, Roche Vandana TPS score is mandatory. So I'm going to that study straight away. Impassion 130, the updated analysis. So patient with metastatic or inoperable locally advanced TNBC without prior treatment, means first line. First line, they have stratified based on prior taxane use, liver metastasis, yes or no, PD-L1, IC status. So it is not the TP score, it is the IC status which is used here. So they are randomized in 1:1 fashion into atezolizumab and nab-paclitaxel versus placebo plus nab-paclitaxel, and treatment until progression is the criteria, and survival follow-up. Primary endpoint PFS and OS in the IC positive patients, and the secondary endpoints were OS in the intent to treat population. So here, if you are seeing the curves, the topmost column is PFS, in the bottom is OS, and they have subdivided into A and B. In the right side, it is PD-L1 positive, and in the left side, in the intent to treat population. So you can see that on the right side, the curve separation is much more impressive and statistically significant also. In the atezoli and nab-paclitaxel versus placebo and nab-paclitaxel, the median PFS is 7.5 months versus 5 months, and the OS is 25 months versus 15.5 months. So if you are seeing the intent to treat population, it is still impressive, but statistically not that significant. So if you are seeing the PD-L1 subset, here the median OS is 25.5 months versus 18 months, but the hazard ratio is not that impressive. So what they have shown is that we will see this slide summary. The median PFS in the, you can concentrate on the right hand side, the PD-L1 population, the net benefit is much more impressive. Median PFS is 5 months, 7.5 months versus 5 months. There is a 2.5 months benefit. In the median OS, 25 months versus 15.5 months. In the median OS, at 1.5 years, updated analysis, again, they are maintaining a 7 months net benefit over the control arm. So, biomarker IC, PD-L1 IC was determined to be highly predictive, and CD8 was predictive of the atezolizumab nab-paclitaxel efficacy for the PFS and OS, and intratumoral CD8, not stromal infiltrating lymphocytes, were well correlated with the PD-L1 IC. So local versus central TNBC assessment was consistent in most patients. Stromal infiltrating T infiltrating lymphocytes, tumor infiltrating lymphocytes are only predictive. The main thing is that intratumoral CD8, it is very well correlated with the third bullet. Intratumoral CD8 is well correlated with the PD-L1 IC. So it is practice changing trial. So it is essential to note that no role of atezolizumab in PD-L1 negative patients. So PD-L1 less than 9, no role. So what about the rest of the 40% which are PD-L1 expressive? So they are going to be the candidates for atezolizumab and nab-paclitaxel. Adequate PD-L1 testing exclusively by SP142 Roche Vendana assay is extremely important rather than any other commercially available assays, as they have found to be showing an inferior capacity to predict atezolizumab benefit in the metastatic TNBC. So every immunotherapy is coming with their own novel testing assay. Here atezolizumab is coming with SP142. What about the 11 in TNBC? We all know that this is an updated analysis, not the EMBRACE study. So what we are seeing that this study is a pre-specified analysis of study 301. Study 301 is the name of the trial. Chris Twells is the primary author. They have published it in 2016. It is a pre-specified analysis of all the intent to treat population. What they have shown is the TNBC subset of the ITT population. In the TNBC subset, there is a remarkable 5 months improvement in the OS for HEL11 compared to capacitabine in the control. So look at the curves. They are separating from the beginning itself, and they continue to separate, and that gap between the curves are maintained. And this is another paper, large real world study. Eribulin used earlier lead to higher overall response rate. So this is a hypothesis. Our teachers also taught us like this, that if you are using the HEL11 eribulin in the early lines, that means you cannot use in the first line. First line approval is not there. So you have to use it at least in the second line to get the optimum result out of HEL11. Here TNBC survival for the metastatic TNBC in this study is considerably shorter, 11 to 17.8 months. Sequential chemotherapy remains the mainstay for the metastatic TNBC patients. So what they have done is that they have made a data presentation of drug regimens used in the treatment, eribulin by line of treatment. Which line we have used eribulin, they have marked like that, and response assessment, adverse effects, and date of death, and last follow-up like that. So here the study, early use versus late use. 252 metastatic TNBC only patients. So 124 patients used as either in the first line or second line in the recurrent setting, and the third line or later another 127 patients. What they have seen is that response rate is cut short by almost 1/3. In the early line, it is almost 70% response rate. In the late line, it is around 48.8%. So median OS, if you are using in the early lines, it is 23 months. In the late lines, it is 14.7 months. And median OS across the lines is 7.6 months. So most common adverse effects are fatigue, neutropenia and weakness, leukopenia, peripheral neuropathy, and it is not markedly different in the late lines also. So why eribulin works so well in TNBC? This is a very interesting hypothesis. What they are doing is that they are converting the less chemosensitive mesenchymal phenotype into epithelial phenotype. And there is a immunomodulatory mechanism also. They decreases the PDL1 expression. So this is what eribulin is using to doing to your cancer. They are changing the mesenchymal back to epithelial cell type. Why these are different? Epithelium have got a cell polarity, mesenchymal has got no cell polarity, and mesenchymal has got loss of cell adhesion, and mesenchymal has got low level of E-cadherin and high level of N-cadherin. And epithelia got a expression of E-cadherin and N-cadherin just opposite to that of mesenchymal. So high this is a paper comparing the 14 eligible studies, high EMT TF expression, that is epithelial mesenchymal transmission factor expression was significantly associated with the poor prognosis in the MBC patients. EMT TF expression levels significantly increase the risk of MBC in Asian population. EMT-TF is EMT inducing transcription factor. So how this is acting, I am repeating what I have mentioned earlier. There is a phenotypic switch from mesenchymal to less aggressive epithelial cells. That is caused by down regulation of the TGF beta and SMAD pathway, upregulation of the epithelial markers, and that means that leading to observed decrease in migration invasiveness, down regulation of the mesenchymal markers, so that causes further suppression of the further metastasis. It really makes the residual tumor less aggressive and less likely to metastasis. Second mechanism, immunomodulatory. I'll just quickly run through because for the lack of time. So this is a fantastic slide. So what eribulin is doing to your tumor, they have in a graphical manner they have shown here, increasing the expression of the epithelial markers of E-cadherin after eribulin treatment, and decrease in the expression of the rest of the markers. That means decrease in N-cadherin, decrease in vimentin. We all know that vimentin is a mesenchymal marker. So after eribulin, you have got a decreased level of N-cadherin, vimentin, and CA19, CA9, decrease in the expression of the hypoxia factors and CA9 after eribulin treatment. And meanwhile, E-cadherin level is increased. That is an epithelial marker. So what about the PDL1? PDL1 2 expression post eribulin treatment, it is decreased and increase in the expression of the CD8 markers. So what happens after eribulin treatment is that PDL1 and CA9 all are decreased. E cadherin is increased, and PDL1 and FOXP3 going negative, and E cadherin is going up. That I have already mentioned, and it increases the vascularity of the tumor. Loss of hypoxia. CA9 is going down. So vascularity part, we are the mechanism of action is explained in this slide. In the mouse xenograft models of the human breast cancer, eribulin treatment was associated with the increased vascular perfusion and permeability, resulting in reduced tumor hypoxia, changes in the expression of the genes in the tumor specimen, and associated with the change in the phenotype. So this is one slide which explain all the mechanism of action of eribulin. It's a trimodal mechanism of action. One thing, there is a vascular remodeling, increase in the tumor microvasculature, microvascular remodeling, decrease in hypoxia, increase subsequently in the vascularity of the tumor is increasing. Mesenchymal to epithelial switch, it renders residual tumor less aggressive and less likely to metastasis by changing mesenchymal to epithelial phenotype. And what it happens, what it's doing to PDL1, it inhibits evasion from immune mechanism by inhibiting the PDL1 and PD1 and PDL1, and local infiltration of the anti-tumor effector cells are also caused. So that is roughly what is discussed in this presentation. A few summing up slides. NCCN saying that is one of the most effective molecules compared to the peers. And this is a very good slide for the students. For somebody who wants to have a paradigm or algorithm for triple negative patients, what we have to do is that PDL1 expression in 2020 is very much important. SB142, Roche Vendana is the method for doing that right now, because Pembro is currently not a first line drug. We are interested in atezolizumab. So if there are three tests you have to do. One, the phenotypic analysis, one, the germline BRCA mutation, and the PDL1 mutation, third one. PDL1, if they are positive, roughly 40% of the TNBC patients, first line atezolizumab, nab-paclitaxel, then the potential second line will be eribulin or capecitabine, or a combination of platinum or gemcitabine. Here, since we have seen the real world data, second line should be eribulin, not capecitabine. So suppose it is PDL1 negative and germ cell BRCA positive, or tissue BRCA, we can extrapolate tissue BRCA also. That constitutes around 15% of the patients. Then in that case, PARP inhibitors are your first line. Or alternatively, if they are not affording for PARP inhibitors, platinum can be used. Then what about the second line? Second line, if you are using PARP inhibitors, the platinum can be used after a gap or after probably eribulin or something like that. And if both are positive, PDL1 and BRCA positive, both are positive, they roughly constitute around 7.5% of the patients. Here you have to use the immunotherapy upfront, atezolizumab, because Down the line, immunotherapy, the response rate is only 1/4 if compared to what you have used in the first line. So here also you have to use the immunotherapy as a first line. In the second line, you can use the PARP inhibitors or platinums. Both BRCA and PD-L1 negative, they constitute around 50% of the patient. Here, you can use taxane with bevacizumab, or if you have used immediate taxane in the adjuvant treatment before, then you can use non-taxane chemotherapy with bevacizumab, or a Ribulin, or a gemcitabine carboplatin, or an anthracycline if not used previously. And if you are using anthracycline, we have to use whether you have crossed the limit or not. And both are negative. What are the second lines? You can use, if you have used taxane in the first line, you can use other chemo plus minus bevacizumab, and you can use the PD-L1 testing, and by another method. Here you are using the 22C3 assay for using the Pembro. If the CPS score is equal to or more than 20, you can use Pembro as monotherapy. Right now, the AR expression agents, enzalutamide and bicalutamide, I have not discussed it in this presentation because of the time sake. We can discuss it afterwards in another presentation. So that is also an option. So to conclude today's massive presentation, it is almost 70 slides. Breakthrough genomic molecular data has led to the development of targeted therapies for different subset of TNBC. What you have to understand that TNBC is not a single monotype. It contains several subtypes, and few promising therapies have already changed the landscape, including Ribulin, including BRCA agents like PARP inhibitors, including immunotherapy. So lot many things are coming up. Appropriate predictive biomarkers for this is the key challenge. Right now, PARP inhibitors only, we have got other than BRCA positivity, only platinum prior sensitivity is the only clinical biomarker, no molecular biomarkers. Prospective validation of these biomarkers are important. Chemotherapy with Ribulin in the second line or carboplatin based chemotherapy in the first line are still effective treatment for many patients. Ribulin, if you are using, you have to use preferably in the second line. First line we have discussed in the treatment algorithm. The immunotherapy is currently the standard of care. In the BRCA positive patient, you can use PARP inhibitors. So that is the end of the presentation. So if there is